Yo, Chuck.
Hey, what's going on YouTube? In this video, we're going to be talking about interpreters and compilers. What are they and how do they differ? So when we talk about interpreters and compilers, it's first noteworthy to mention what is the goal of an interpreter or compiler. You see, when we write code in any language, we need to convert it to ones and zeros for our computer to understand it. In this example, I have code I wrote in JavaScript, but it could be any language like C++, Go, Haskell, anything really. And I try to send it to my computer, and my computer will not understand it because my computer only understands ones and zeros. So to get our computer to understand our code, it needs to be either interpreted or compiled. Now that we've used an interpreter or a compiler, our computer is able to read this machine code of ones and zeros, and it's able to output our program, which in this case is Pong. So you can see we've got to convert whatever code, whatever programming language it is, into ones and zeros, into a machine language that our computer can actually understand for it to produce what we want it to produce. So this slide is just kind of outlining the main differences between an interpreter and a compiler. But just know that an interpreter is going one line or one statement at a time and then converting that line or statement into machine code, which is then read by the computer and executed. Whereas a compiler is more of a holistic idea. It's taking the whole program of code you wrote, converting that all into machine code, and then giving it to the computer to execute. So a compiler takes longer actually to analyze the code, whereas an interpreter is a little bit faster at the analyzing part, but a compiler is much faster when the code is actually executed in comparison to an interpreter. Here we have an illustration of what's happening with our code when we put it through a compiler or interpreter. Notice up here we've got the source code, we run it through our compiler. Holistically, we're going to take that whole program and transform it into machine code. From there, we're able to execute the code. Now this is in contrast to the interpreter, where we take the source code and then we run it through the interpreter. Each line or each statement is read one at a time, then executed. So notice the difference there. One line or one statement at a time, straight to the execution phase. Whereas with the compiler, we're taking the whole batch of code, converting it into machine code, and then the program is executed. As a developer, you're going to run across interpreted languages and compiled languages. Either if you're front end or back end, it doesn't matter. But with the interpreted languages, we've got like JavaScript, Ruby, Python. It's not all the time, but generally they're a little bit more noob friendly and beginner oriented. This is in contrast to compiled languages like C, Go, C++. These are a little more heavy on the computer sciencey side, and generally there's a little bit more of a learning curve. But there's a learning curve for any programming language because at the root level, they're all pretty hard and they can get pretty deep. But just know that interpreted languages are a little bit easier for the beginning user. But wait, it gets more confusing. So there's languages like Java that might be a compiled and an interpreted language. Here you have source code, which is being compiled into a lower level language of bytecode. And when we say lower level language, that's basically a language your computer can understand, but a human would have a really hard time understanding because it looks so ugly with like its ones and zeros and whatnot. And it's being interpreted by the Java virtual machine, which is a Java engine. So really, Java could be considered both a compiled and interpreted language, which really muddies the waters here. But there's a whole bunch of languages that could be considered both compiled and interpreted. So what do we even do about that? How do we address that? And that's kind of the point before I close this presentation I want to put across is maybe there's a lot of languages that could be classified as interpreted or compiled, but I think the main thing to take away from this is just what is happening in the process when we say a language is being interpreted. Well, we know it's going line by line, executing that code to produce a desired output. And what is happening when we compile a language? Well, we know from the holistic idea that we're compiling or transforming our whole program block into machine code, which is then executed. So if you know and understand those two concepts, you should be good. So I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.